pinnacle of human perspective.
Welcome, everybody. This is Paranormal Frequencies. This is a special broadcast because it is Halloween, and our guest today is Ryan Hurd. How's it going, Ryan? Welcome.
Hey, and welcome. Thank you. It's great to be here.
Yeah, thanks for taking the time in your busy day to meet up with us on Halloween for the special broadcast. And we're going to have you back next month as well. But welcome, Sherry.
Hey, how y'all doing?
Hey.
I have to say, y'all, if things get weird over here, I'm with my son at a car dealership. I really wanted to do this with Ryan today, so I just said I was going to do it anyway if it was in the bathroom or whatever. And they gave me at my own office, so I'm sitting here. And if he gets denied and a screaming kid runs in here, I'll just have to let y'all go on your own. So anyway, I'm so excited about our guest today. This is Ryan Hurd, and he is the author of Sleep Paralysis, A Guide to Hypnagogic Visions and Visitors of the Night, and also Lucid Dreaming. New perspectives on consciousness and sleep, and Lucid Immersion, a guidebook to lucid dreaming. So what I'm really excited about, though, and since it's Halloween, I wanted to talk to him today on a little short show about his sleep paralysis kit, because I'm just dying to know what's in there.
I actually got a screenshot of it right here. This looks cool. Just $9, huh? Right now it's on sale, it looks like.
Yep, that's right. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, special today for $9. That's awesome, since it's Halloween.
Awesome. So the link is in the description below, you guys, for you guys watching later or live right now. You can find his books and the kit at dreamstudies.org.
And also supplements like galantamine, some kind of for like lucid dreaming promotion, I guess you'd say. Anyway, so right, the first thing that I want to ask is, how did you find out about lucid dreaming or get interested in it?
It happened spontaneously for me. I was one of these young dreamers who just had spontaneous lucid moments where I knew I was dreaming in the dream. The first time I was probably 5 or 6 years old. And it was a hypnagogic experience. So I was going to sleep, right? And as I was drifting to sleep, I was noticing all these little lights collecting around me, this little bright little, almost psychotropic lights. And then they began to organize, and then they took on the shape of a spiral. And then that spiral became 3-dimensional. And I entered into that. And then I fell asleep. And I realized that this was a great way to fall asleep quickly. And so this was my hypnagogic entry into sleep when I was 6 years old.
Wow.
That's interesting. You know what? I've had that happen as well. And it was just like what they termed the DMT tunnel. When you're falling asleep and your brain releases the DMT. But of course you can, use DMT and get that same experience. And I didn't notice these hypnagogic images were that until I had experienced that. And it was almost like fractal spirals in a 3D way. Was it sort of fractalized, these things you saw?
How interesting. I've had a diversity of experiences. Sometimes it's fractal, sometimes it's more organic.
Mm-hmm. That's really interesting. So you can get to this point. Have you figured out, I guess, a way to stay there without falling asleep right away?
Yeah, so absolutely. So they call that wake-initiated lucid dreaming. And so it's easier to do in the middle of the night rather than trying right when you're going to sleep, because we tend to fall more or less into deep sleep in that first chunk of sleep,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it's better, say, 4 to 5 hours in
Mm-hmm.
to drift off and to try to keep that focus. Keep repeating to yourself, I'm awake, I'm dreaming, kind of go back and forth. And yeah, that's what happens. That imagery will just show up, and we'll float into it. And what's nice is that because at that point in the night we're primed for REM sleep, right? Rapid eye
Mm-hmm.
movement sleep. So we'll move straight from that hypnagogic experience into a fully, lucid dream where we'll be in the dreamscape completely.
In control if you want, right?
It's interesting. A lot of people, that's what they say when they hear lucid dreaming. And I would say it's about self control, and it's about awareness and making choices, and meeting the dream halfway. So there is absolutely a manipulation piece. Like you can manifest, right? You
Mm-hmm.
can create realities in these. Inception is not too far off, the movie.
I love that
uh,
movie. Yeah.
yeah, right. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
they did their research. Listen, they did their research. They got a lot right in that movie. And but also the dream has its own. It has its own energy. It's trying to do something, and so we have to meet it halfway. And so sometimes people who come in thinking that lucid dreaming is like virtual reality run into some obstacles
Yeah.
when the dream is like, no, not so much.
Well,
Me, I'm sorry.
go ahead, Sherry, in
Well, I
case
was
you
just
get
gonna
cut
say
off.
before I learned that you like travel by thought, I was trying to like get to a certain place and Google Maps like popped up like a screen like in the middle of the air floating. So I mean, but what I was gonna say is I did have a quick question that's personal, but I gotta take advantage of you since they're here and find out. Have you ever heard of, or what would it be if someone wakes up periodically in the middle of the night and they're like in this like euphoric, weird, blissed out, still state, like real
Mm.
floating. Like I think it's like maybe it like kind of could be like a jumping off point, but I don't know what that is exactly.
That I mean, that is something that I've heard a lot about. I've experienced once or twice myself, and there's a lot of different ways to talk about it. But probably the realm of hypnagogia is where to go. So, that hypnagogia is these dream visions that we have sometimes with our eyes open, and so they kind of create a hybrid space. And so we can wake up from our dream and say, oh, I'm awake, and then at the same time see dream imagery at the same
Overlaid,
time,
right?
overlaid and integrating with our perceptions. And I think people have ancestral visitations in this state of mind, and in other kinds of encounters. But these feelings you're talking about almost sounds like a heart opening, like a non-dual, kind of experience. And yeah, these are like a spontaneous transpersonal experience is what I would call that. And it absolutely is part and parcel. You often will see it happening with monks or people who do a lot of mantras and prayer. This is a byproduct of doing all of that work when they shift their sleep patterns. And then essentially for say Tibetan Buddhism, these monks who do this kind of work, right? Sleep and meditation combine. Like, is it
Mm,
meditation? Is it sleep? I don't know.
right. Well, I've actually woke up before and saw my bedroom, and the walls had this overlay of what looked like hieroglyphics. They were like kind of glowing like this fiery color, and it was over, and I'm like, and it wasn't even weird. I mean, you would think I'd be like, what the heck, but I was still enough in dream state that I was like, wow, that is really cool. I didn't really freak out about it. I just kind of enjoyed it. And then, I guess it faded away over time, but it was even with the walls. I mean, it looked like my walls had the hieroglyphs on it. So it wasn't like I'm like seeing a different wall. I mean, it was like even with my
Mm-hmm.
wall. So it made me feel like, wow, is this always there? Is this like something that we just don't perceive when we're fully awake?
Yeah, absolutely. That's really interesting. And the interesting thing about hypnagogia is that one can be awake and then like walk around the house. Some people continue to see the imagery for a couple of minutes after they awake, which can be disturbing as well, especially like start to question one's sanity.
Hmm.
Why am I hallucinating while I'm, what's going on? But it's completely normal to have visions essentially on that side of sleep.
Well, I noticed like when you're sort of awakened because you have to go to the bathroom, a lot of times you're like on autopilot, so you're still asleep while you're going to the restroom. And so one day I noticed while I was going to the restroom, like that was my first aware moment. I didn't remember getting into the bathroom, but I heard this voice that had carried over from sleep. So I guess it was sort of like a hypnagogic audio that carried over, sort of like the hieroglyphs. And the voice, it was a woman's voice that said something like, "Don't forget, this is a matrix. Don't get fooled by the game. You know, it's designed to make it a real experience." And I'm like, "Who's this voice talking to me?" And I was able to remember that little tidbit, but that part was just the end of something that had been a longer conversation. I mean, I knew it wasn't the first thing that was said, but I sort of pulled that over, and I'm like, what the heck? I could totally see people freaking out if they're like, I'm hearing voices or something, but it was sort of like a dreamtime voice that I just continued to hear just for like a few seconds, before I fully woke up.
I think I I
Nice.
think I have the same lady because I'll be waking up and she'll just scream something at me like they're trying to give me one message right before I wake up, like the blue guys are nice or
Right.
something. Like, yeah, I'm gonna take note of that.
Yeah, yeah. I love how some people get the audio only. Some people are very visual. Some people smell things. Like I've had experiences in hypnagogia where suddenly I smell like the ocean and I can feel the cool, misty air. And then
Wow.
as it fades, I smell my actual bedroom, which does not smell like the cool, misty ocean.
Right. Well, I do want to
I
touch
smell
on sleep
spirit.
paralysis because
No,
I'm
that's what
sorry. Yeah, sorry. There's a little bit of a delay.
no,
Um,
I said that's what we're here for is this sleep paralysis kit that you got. I'm so excited.
Right, but yeah, but you hear people talk about sleep paralysis like it's this horrible thing, like they want it to stop. And in a way, I've had it happen before, and I thought at the time I was sort of into targeted individual stuff, so I thought like, I said something on my channel, and the government's beaming with the satellite because my whole body was vibrating like it was asleep, and I didn't know what to expect, But then it reminded me of my childhood nightmares. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's what I felt when I was a child when I'd have the nightmares and I'd run to my parents' room and it was this full body vibration and this loud sound of vibrating and it was just so overwhelming it made me fearful and I hadn't experienced that since I was a child, so I kept trying to roll over and wake my wife up, of course, and every time I roll over to wake her up, I never moved. So I did it like 6 times in a row. I kept rolling over, and then I finally stood up and thought I was awake, and I still wasn't awake. I was back in the bed again, and then I heard a notification on my phone, and I sort of like anchored to that sound and was able to pull myself out into reality. If I had known what was going on, I would have enjoyed it, and I haven't been able to get back there since. But a lot of people get this. Somebody that does this naturally. I mean, isn't this sort of a gift if they can get beyond the fear?
Mm. Oh, that's a great way to think about it. Yeah, sleep paralysis is a gift if you can get beyond the fear, and I think that's a big if because the state is pretty creepy. The way that it's laid out, and it's sort of we're neurologically primed to experience negative emotions in this particular state, unless we've done a lot of positive expectation work kind of going in. And again, that's a big if, right? So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
so let me define it, right? So sleep paralysis, it's related to hypnagogia. It sometimes happens at the same time as this hypnagogic hallucination, but it's the state of consciousness that happens where it's almost like a hybrid state. So the body wakes up. Well, let me say that again. The mind wakes up, but the body is asleep. So the body is still in that REM state, REM paralysis. All of your major muscle groups are essentially dampened.
Mm-hmm.
So we can't act out our dreams. And that includes the diaphragm. And so we can't take gigantic gulping, breaths of air. We can still breathe. The lungs can still breathe, but we're not, the diaphragm is very much also going through this paralysis. And so what people experience is, number one, they feel awake and aware, like their eyes are often open, they're looking around their room, and then they try to move, and that's when that paralysis is noticed. And when it's noticed, it feels like something else is holding you down, because that's just the way we're primed to think and experience reality. We're very social, especially when we're scared. And so what's happening to me? Someone is doing this to me. And so we try to scream for help, and the breath gets caught in our throat because, again, of that dampening feeling. And so people experience a weight on their chest, or even feeling like
someone's
hands on their throat, and it becomes a part of it's basically a hallucination in that sense.
I've even heard of the breath. People hear themselves breathe and they don't realize it's their own breath as well. So they'll feel like, hey, someone was behind me breathing. And
happens all the time. I laugh at myself because me and my mom like watching those ghost shows, and they'll be like, I was in bed, and then all of a sudden I was being held down and I saw this, whatever. And I'm just like, it's sleep paralysis. But I mean, I'm not telling, I'm not cutting them down. I just wish they knew what it was so they weren't as afraid.
Right.
I'm going to tell you something. One night, I don't know what it was. I was sleeping, probably because I was sleeping on the floor by my grandson, so I probably wasn't comfortable all the way. I had sleep paralysis over and over. And I have my daughter's boyfriend. He has it all the time. And I'm like, Jeremy, you've got this jumping off point. All you got to do is focus on something positive and you'll go and all this. And he...
Whoops, you froze. If you can hear me, sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so finish your thought. I didn't mean to interrupt and sort of go off on a tangent. So, what was the next step to that?
You're back. We lost you for a second there.
Oh, you lost me?
Yeah.
I just had a bad night of sleep paralysis over and over, and I saw how bad it was, and how I was just like, so terrified, and I was ready for it. I had read everything about it. I knew what it was. And I was like, I'm going to be fine when this happens to me.
Famous
I
last
was
words.
tripped out, man.
Yeah.
God, let me go. No.
Yeah, it's creepy. And that's what's so, what people I don't think understand until you experience it, is the level of fear is so strong. And partially that's part of the altered state of consciousness too. The way that the brain is working, we're primed for negative emotions in REM sleep. The amygdala, that part of the brain that's like fight or flight, it's just like lots of activity going on. And so we go down into those fear channels really easily, even when this is sleep paralysis. And so it's important to have an affirmation of some kind. And this is what I teach people. Have an affirmation that's like, hey, I'm in sleep paralysis. This is natural. And or what can I focus on? Like you were saying, something or someone of love, or curiosity to move beyond fear. Because once our curiosity is greater than our fear, then the reality begins to shift and other things begin to open up. But again, big if. It's really tough. And so when the hallucinations come in, the visual hallucinations, but they're not just random. Let's not, like, the hallucination doesn't mean random. It's just the mind. We see and experience ghosts and entities and aliens and angels and ancestors and googlies and succubi and three-headed dogs and it's just, and spiders. It's super intense, and it's precisely what we don't want to see. And so it feels like a very real encounter. It'd be like, this can't be happening to me. I'm awake and aware right now, and yet there's a demon sitting on my chest.
Right.
As a matter of fact.
And you can say to the demon at the time, and I've done this, you'd be like, you're not real. And it could just be like, what are you going to do? It's interesting. It's a very stable state of consciousness for as long as it lasts, which is just a couple of minutes. And so there's some opportunities in here to move beyond fear, to open up our boundaries, to ask questions, to engage in dialogue. Even there's some ways that people have done this very creatively, that always surprises me. And then if it's just too spooky, there's ways to wake up. And I always tell people, hey, look, dreamer's choice. If this is too creepy, if your boundaries are it's just too much, then try to move your fingers or your toes, or try to blink your eyes, because this is the kind of thing that breaks up those paralysis feelings, and we can eject out of the state.
Well,
You know,
I
after
heard,
the
I'm sorry,
go
sorry.
ahead. No,
I'm
no,
so
there's a delay. Sorry, go ahead.
no. I was just gonna say that I always heard just to show whatever it is love, and so I try to think of like from the Goonies, Chunk, how he was like not really cute, but he was sweet and he liked baby Ruth and everything. Like you think he's scary, but he wasn't. So
Oh,
if
Yeah,
right,
you
right.
just be like
yeah,
that with it,
yeah,
Well,
right.
it might work for you.
well, see, the problem I had that first time, the fear I felt like actually kept me awake and aware longer, or actually kept my mind more aware longer, because was in fear, thinking maybe I had a health issue or something going on. Now, when I feel it coming on, I get excited. I'm like, don't get too excited. Don't get too excited. Just relax, relax. And then I fall asleep. So I'm almost too relaxed at this point. Instead of relaxing back into it, what's something else I can do that I won't ruin
Mm,
it by moving or waking up, but
mm.
I can not relax so much that I drift off asleep, because I can feel the vibration coming on, and then I try to relax into it, and then I fall asleep instead of stay awake.
So good, good. Well, I think that what the next step is to have an easily remembered intention.
Mm-hmm.
So plan out what your move is before it happens, and you can formalize that into an affirmation or write it down in a journal. But the idea is the next time I'm in sleep paralysis, I'm going to try to have an out of body experience,
Mm-hmm.
where I'm going to, yeah, right, or
Maybe I'm
I'm
waiting too long then. Maybe at that point I feel the vibration. I should just try to go to the, Giza pyramids or something exciting like I want to do. Or
it's I've found when it's in the vibrational state, that's really the best time to try to go out of body rather than go back into the dream state,
mm-hmm.
because we're sort of more identified still with the strange sensations that are happening in absence of perceptions from the physical body.
Mm.
And so there's lots of strange things happening with our concepts of self. It could be splitting. We could experience a doppelganger, like
Oh
a
God.
stranger type figure, or we could shift down and move out of body as it feels, into the air, or I often drift into the mattress. I go down. I tend to,
Sink
yeah,
down
drift.
into it.
I sink down into vast, weird spaces. Is apparently my mode of travel. So there's some individual differences,
Mm-hmm.
but the vibrational state is a great time to set intentions towards those kind of goals.
Oh, okay. So yeah, I've just been relaxing at that point, waiting for it to get intense like it did that first time. And it never gets to that point. I'm just vibrating, and I'm afraid if I go to move, I'm just going to move my arm
Mm.
and ruin it. Because moving actually, if you're not all the way there, that will stop the process and have to start all over again, is what I
It
heard, right?
can, it can, but there's some kind of movements that seem to work. Like for instance, one that works for some people is to try to sit up, is to try to focus your attention on your navel, and then try to do a sit up. And what happens is once you've done that focusing, if kind of like if everything is aligned correctly, that etheric double, you begin to identify with your etheric double as opposed to the constraints of the physical
Mm,
body.
I
And so
got you.
your sense of self essentially switches identities from the physical body to this whatever it is, this double, this stranger figure, and then we can navigate that bizarre space. So try
Oh.
that one. That's a nice one.
I
So
think going down through the mattress is a good thing too, because if you are pushing downward, that because I felt my hand go into the mattress before, and I'm like, I know my hand didn't really go into
my
the mattress.
shoulder always
Yeah,
goes.
yeah. So that's the point. I should just try to sink my whole body through there, or just go with that feeling at that moment, I guess.
I say to people to go if you're being pushed, go with where the direction you're being pushed, rather than resisting,
Mm-hmm.
sort of, move with it, enter the dance, be able to surrender to a certain extent. And yeah, there's like, I think, an art to it, and everyone's got their own peculiar way of going about it. So it's you just have to find your own sort of way.
So are you from the camp that believes that it sounds like that lucid dreaming and out of body experience is the same thing, just maybe a different state of consciousness, or do you believe they're different?
So, I mean, I think as phenomenons, they're very different. Lucid dreaming has a lot of different. There's different. Yeah, it's a different experience than an out of body type experience. They feel very differently. When I'm in an out of body experience, yeah, absolutely, it feels like a different state
Yeah,
of mind.
out of body just seems real, like you're there.
It
You
does.
know, like
It has that real factor, kind of like sleep paralysis does. But it does enter into hybrid spaces, and so I don't necessarily think that every out of body is out of that we're in a real version of our room. It can be almost like a hybrid space, a mind version. Actually, I try to stay open to it. I've heard some pretty interesting encounters. I had one encounter that left me guessing a little bit, and this one was I was probably about 15, maybe 14 or 15 years old. I had an out of body experience, and I floated down out of my bedroom, down the hallway of my house, my parents' house, into the living room, and there I saw our family dog sleeping on the couch. And in the experience, the dog, Sadie, lifted her head as if she could sense me, but she didn't like she could see me, but she could sense me. And so that's what I recall about that encounter. But then I woke up the next day and I was like, you know what? That was a dream, because I remembered that we don't allow the dog to sleep on the couch anymore. In fact, my parents put these metal chairs up every night before they go to bed to keep the dog from getting on the couch at night. And so there was no way that could have happened. Yet when I got up that morning and went out into the living room, it turns out that particular night my parents had forgotten to put the chairs up, and my dog was sleeping on the couch on that spot. And so that was an interesting. I mean, it's not necessarily totally convincing, but it was like, well, I don't know. That is intriguing. And of course, there's much more convincing accounts all over the world. I mean, Charles Tart has been doing this research since the 1960s, and he's had subjects, guess correctly a number written on the ceiling. And there's problems with the research, but the problems aren't insurmountable. There's sort of just a lack of funding and a lack of interest in this kind of work. But there's some really great out of body experience professionals, continuing that work forward.
And one of the doctors that I used to go to, and I mean, because I've always talked about all my weird stuff to whoever, and he like left a number out on his desk or up high on a shelf, I think it was, for me to try to find if I went out. But I mean, whenever you get that chance, God, I'm not thinking about going to look at the number. I want to, go do something more fun or whatever.
Well, that's the problem with a lot of this research is that when we're in the state, those kind of intentions it seems like BS. It's like, no, that's not what this is about. I'm going to have an authentic experience now that's beyond whatever that is, to our disappointment later upon waking up. But I think that it's important to realize that there is, we are different people when we're in these altered states of consciousness. We're not our waking version of ourself. We're a different version of ourself, and we're in a different mode of being. If we were to hold up a mirror, we wouldn't be who we think we are necessarily. And so there's a flexibility, I think, to our identity that isn't talked about usually with this kind of thing. We're more emotional. We tend to be more philosophical. All the big questions, all the stuff that's scary that we put aside comes up, And so if we have a fearful moment or traumatic experience, like the door with the most pressure behind it is gonna open first, right? And that's the way it is with extraordinary experience. And so, yeah, you got to roll with that.
So do you think? I'm so sorry.
No,
Always do it.
that
It's
was
your
me.
turn.
No,
Go.
that was me. So I was just wanting to get back to the sleep paralysis kit and what what we might expect from it and what it does.
Oh, sure. So this is a product I've had out for quite a while. It's an ebook. It's a full length ebook, along with some worksheets and some audio files and some. I believe I've got a recording of a lecture I gave at Stanford University talking about sleep paralysis. I've got a really cool interview with Jorge Canisa Sevilla, who is this fabulous researcher in sleep paralysis who's had all kinds of interesting encounters. And so the idea of the kit, as well as my physical, is my book, which has a slightly different title, but is about 95% the same content, is to move a person from fear to empowerment, to make a plan with their sleep paralysis, whether they want to stop it or if they want to move into these out of body realms or these lucid dreaming realms, or have a guided journey. And even to, the idea of triggering more sleep paralysis when you want to have it. And that's about reverse engineering what are your triggers in the first place. And so that's sleep paralysis management. And then you flip it and you say, okay, how can I shake myself up a little bit to get back into that state? Right, Shane? So that's like what you need to do is find out what your triggers are, which probably are things like not enough sleep, caffeine at a weird time, sleep on your back, sleep alone when your wife's out of town or whatever, and you're a little uncomfortable. Right. And so this is the kind of thing, and you create basically the perfect storm of physical conditions, and then with your mental preparedness, boom, it happens.
Yeah, because it can be food or anything, huh? Like some people eat stuff that causes
Indigestion, is causes disruption in sleep, and so if we're not comfortable, it can cause fragmented sleep. Fragmented sleep can cause these kind of hiccups in the sleep cycle. So absolutely, I mean, Charles Dickens noticed this. The Christmas Carol. He sees the ghost of Morley, and he says, "I don't know if you're real or not, or if you're just an undigested piece of beef." So this is an idea that's gone back, quite some time. But Dickens was a sleep paralysis sufferer. He had these experiences, and they were impactful for him. He conversated with ghosts, or who he perceived to be ghosts, and angels. And anyway, it's very interesting. And so I think that what's possible is indeterminate. And so be open, protect yourself, but be open,
I think it's cool that people that want to get rid of it can also get the kit and figure out how not to do the things in the kit, right? And to prevent it from happening, figuring out the triggers.
That's true. But I'll tell you, dreamstudies.org is my blog, and I have got all that stuff for free. If you search through it, I try to make my material about management and how to get over the fear of sleep paralysis. I try to make that free and available as a public service. And I really, for those who want to go further and deeper, that's when I start looking at some of this advanced dream work, basically, is what it is. So there's a lot of material on my blog as well.
And that is linked below, just so you guys know. It's right at the top. Dreamstudios.org. Is that right?
You have to say that again. It was
Dreamstudios.org. The link is down below.
Right, dreamstudies.org. And so that I've had that blog since 2007, and it's got just loads of articles about sleep paralysis, lucid nightmares, out-of-body experiences, dreaming, dream work. It's really been my repository of my own learning over the last few years.
Do you have a place where people share stuff? Oh, you might have said that, and it might have broke up when I didn't or no, it's not where people and tell stories to you?
Nobody really uses comments anymore on blogs like they did in the good old days. But I get the stories through Facebook. People come to my Facebook page and, Dream Studies portal on Facebook, and I find a lot of encounters there. And then I get people by email, and I get some really strange stories, especially, we're in the ghost space where, I get a lot of people who tell me their encounters when they have erotic encounters with ghosts. and they have relationships with ghosts. I mean, that's related to sleep paralysis too. And there's such a taboo against this stuff, right? And people are like, I think I'm going crazy, and I'd like to be able to be like, no, you're not. This is a known phenomena. This is a part of human experience, apparently, that some of us have erotic encounters with unknown entities that are sometimes actually right orgasmic, and so there's a couple of celebrities who've admitted to having ghost sex over the last few years. I think Keisha was one of them, and Lucy
You're on it,
Liu.
on me.
Lucy Liu had an experience with a ghost not too long ago, and people shamed her for it, or told her, it was like, you're making that up. It's like, you don't make something like this up.
Right.
It's just too weird. Why would you want? Why would you want to?
Well, I kind of sometimes I think there's just a little more to it than all that, but I'm one of those people that's like a big. I guess I'm just a believer. You know what I mean? Because without getting all into it, but I've had like well, I probably what you would call a sleep paralysis encounters with Michael Jackson when I'm like a rock and roll type person, but then I started having things in the physical. Like the next day I got a Twitter notification that said Michael Jackson and Ghost Adventures is now following you. Then I start thinking that I'm like, targeted because I mean, and then I don't know, it's stuff like that. To me, there's just I'm starting to think that we're in a lucid dream right now.
I love that question. I mean, it's, listen, the more people get into dreams and nightmares, I hear this all the time. The synchronicities start popping up. People start having, dreams, and then they're dreams that come true, and I think that we can't discount this stuff. We can't discount our own experiences. I always, as a researcher, I have to kind of make a line between an experience and the interpretation of that experience. And so I try to stick close to how something is for me and how it's described to me. And then I take my interpretations and later, and I just try not to mix the two, so I can stay more open to what's happening. But I think there's a lot of validity to what you're talking about, and certainly it's a common experience. I mean, the thing is that so many of us have extraordinary dreams or visions, synchronicities like that, and they're just all different varieties. And if you were all to get together in a room and talk about it, you'd realize that so many of us are having them. It's really not that uncommon. And so, I mean, they're saying now that people believe in ghosts more, more than God, which is, I think, awesome. It is. There's just this is yeah. We're on the ground floor. We're all researchers of our own consciousness, and we all have valid perspective.
Well, I want to go to the chat here for a minute because, and I think this is really cool because somebody's mentioning that they think they're wondering where attachments come in, right? Like some kind of entity attachment, and how she says her dude would literally be strangled, and she watched it happen, and that when they got rid of the attachment, these sort of sleep paralysis symptoms went away. So is that pointing to that this could be a psychological thing, and when you feel like you get rid of it, the fear goes away with it? Or do you feel like there could be some sort of attachment or entity that's sort of bothering someone?
Uh, Either interpretation, the practical response in my mind is the same, which is
Exactly.
to learn how to practice psychic self-defense.
Mm-hmm.
To know what your boundaries are, so you can release them and enter into a relationship when you do, and you know how to get out when it's not right. And so the question, is, how can I feel safe? How can I secure my space when I'm in these liminal states? And like, for me, it's things that don't make much sense in waking life, but they make sense when I'm in the state, which is like to have objects under my bed that I know are healing objects that repel negative energy, right? Obsidian as a stone absorbs negative energy. I actually created my own dream talisman, so I could have this for myself, is something that basically because in that state, I'm like, oh, this is powerful in this state, and it shows itself up. And so our memory is predisposed to it in altered states for liminal objects, magical objects to have import for us. And so that's where I move the conversation to. It's like, what can you do? And if you do feel like your boundaries, are fine and you're in conversation with an entity, be authentic, share and learn and research and honor that experience in waking life and take it further. Because when we do that over the lifespan, that encounter could come back up and it could bring new information, new insight, and new connection and belonging with that secret self, that larger than sense of belonging we have with the world. And it's not so dark and isolating.
Well, one of the things that I heard that the fear to get through that doorway, you're faced with this fear because you can create anything there. So you're sort of you're supposed to, I guess, be scared off at the door if you're going to get in there and scare yourself half to death, because don't you kind of pull in your paradigm with you? So if you're the type of person that thinks angels and demons are in battle all the time for your soul, and then you're going to pull that with you, and that's really going to be your reality during this sleep time. Is that how you see it working, Ryan?
Well, yeah, and what's interesting is that we can hold multiple paradigms simultaneously, and so we can confuse ourselves. And what I've found is that when we're fearful, especially, we tend to pull and draw from the paradigms that we had when we were children. And we kind of go back to those defenses that we had that worked for us when we were young. But unfortunately, what comes with that is a worldview that's often very black and white, good and evil. It's very dualistic. It's simplistic, right? And so that paradigm can be rigid. And so what I recommend for people is to do a little bit of work reflecting on what were your core beliefs as a child. What are your core beliefs now? How has that changed? What can you let go of? What still seems pretty solid? And when we kind of make that unconscious work conscious, then when we go into fearful places, we're on more solid footing.
So really the main thing is to get beyond the fear, and that is sort of a prepper. I guess you prep for it by knowing what you're going to do once you get into this state, have some intention set, and just leave the fear out of it. Because if you're like, I'm afraid of spiders, then you're going to go in and you're going to have spiders all over you, probably, right?
Yeah, it's interesting. We have these little. I have a lot of lucid nightmares, or I used to. And when I would be in a lucid dream, there would be this little, it's a thought attachment. It's a repetitive thought that's like something's going to get you. And that's that negative expectation that really sends things spiraling down. And it's learning over time that those little negative gremlins, they have some power, but they don't really have that much power. And you can learn to blow them off. And they're not as strong as that encounter that you're having that's in the moment. And so it might influence it, but if you can catch it early and just be like, yeah, I see you, and I'm going to just not really engage in that and refocus, then the encounter can go on in a way that's more fruitful.
Who was it, Sherry, that said that they had some kind of monster that would chase them in their sleep, and then finally they turn around and say, "Why are you chasing me?" And it said, "Because you run."
Joel. It was Joel. I had a short thing like that where something was, following me. I'm running through the forest. It comes down and, kind of goes on top of me, and it had horns and everything. And when I told him get off and get away from me, him and all kind of other, I had an audience. They all started clapping for me like they were proud of me. So I think you can learn to, maybe they kind of guide you to get through it sometimes, But I know that you're pressed for time. Did you need to wrap it up, Ryan?
Yeah, I should take off pretty soon. Yeah.
Okay. Well, do you have anything coming up you want to discuss? Any conferences or anything else besides the website and books that you want to promote right now?
Well, I just started doing some online teaching again. I'm actually running a sleep paralysis online class right now through Teachable, and it's been really fun to do that again. And what I'm hoping to do is start doing some more live lucid dreaming trainings, advanced trainings, probably once a month or so throughout the winter and into next year. So if people, subscribe to my newsletter, get my free ebook on Enhance Your Dream Life, you'll be able to stay in the know about that stuff.
That's awesome. So yeah, if you guys check that out, Ryan's going to join us again next month here in just a few weeks, and we will, if you have any questions, we can ask them then, or you can take the Teachable class. What you said, Teachable?
That's right. Yeah.
Available through the website as well?
It's dreamstudies.teachable.com.
Okay. Oh, perfect. I will add that link below. So you guys watching this later, you can click that right under the dreamstudies.org link. And I want to thank you for your time, Ryan.
Yeah, Ryan, thank you so much for coming, and we're looking forward to seeing you again.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to part 2. We just got started.
Got started.
Great.
Lots of love to you guys in the chat. We'll see you on the next one. Peace.
Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween.
If you'd like to support the work I do, go to paypal.me/UOTF. Thanks.